Ancient structures and mysterious underground complexes, scattered across the world like parts of a single lost map, continue to raise questions that archaeology can't always answer. Megaliths, tunnels, platforms, and stone structures point to vanished knowledge and forgotten technologies. This scenario explores 20 mysteries associated with lands where traces of ancient cultures intersect with myths, legends, and possible human losses. The disappearance of Nabta Playa. Nabta Playa, located in the depths of Egypt's western desert, has long attracted the attention of researchers as one of the most ancient ritual and astronomical complexes in the Sahara. Here, among stone circles constructed with mathematical precision and long lines of landmarks stretching to the horizon, a settlement once existed, thriving thanks to seasonal rains and deep wells. However, one of the region's most intriguing mysteries lies not in its construction, but in the disappearance of the people who left behind such a complex structure. Archaeological evidence shows that Nabta Playa was suddenly abandoned, as if its inhabitants had vanished in an instant, leaving behind silent stone symbols. According to geological data, the Sahara's climate fluctuated dramatically in ancient times, undergoing cycles of wet and dry periods. However, even accounting for these changes, the human retreat from Nabta Playa appears too abrupt. The area provided ample water for several centuries, and the structures built there testify to a long and stable presence. But at some point, all of this ceased to be necessary. Hypotheses include sudden drought, internal conflicts, and ritual changes, but there are also more unusual suggestions related to cosmic and geophysical factors. Some researchers believe Nabta Playa may have been more than just a ritual circle, but part of a more complex celestial observation system. If so, the disappearance of its builders could be linked to an astronomical event. For example, the appearance of an unusual celestial object or the movement of stars that held special significance in their calendars. This could have been perceived as a sign of change, requiring them to abandon the area. However, there is still insufficient material evidence to support this interpretation. It's also interesting that the cultural layer at Nabta Playa shows almost no signs of destruction. There are no traces of fires, flash floods, or military clashes, nothing that would explain the hasty exodus. The stone structures remain intact, suggesting a deliberate departure. But why did people abandon a place they'd invested so much effort in? One theory suggests resource depletion. The water bodies may have gradually diminished until, at some point, the usual cycle of life became impossible. However, even in this case, a gradual decline in presence, rather than a sudden collapse, would be expected. Some archaeologists consider Nabta Playa's connection to later Nile cultures. Its inhabitants may have formed part of the group that later formed the early Neolithic and pre-dynastic communities along the river. In this case, the disappearance is not the end, but a migration that left stone structures as a monument to the transition. However, it remains unclear why the former settlement wasn't used by other groups. The site, with its wells and landmarks, must have been important. But no one occupied it after the first builders left. There are also more speculative hypotheses linking the disappearance to changes in geomagnetic activity or rare climate events that could have affected the environment so much that people decided to relocate. Some alignments of the structures indicate specific stellar positions, and if the celestial cycle shifted, the ritual center could have lost its significance. This idea echoes the beliefs of many ancient cultures who believed that sacred sites should correspond to celestial signs. Artifacts found at Nabta Playa also indicate a complex exchange system, which included people from distant regions of Africa. The disappearance may be due to a disruption of these routes. For example, if climate change made migration routes difficult or unsafe. In such a case, people could have migrated to areas where communication with neighbors was easier. However, there are no signs of conflict or external pressure here either. The central stone circle, in which some slabs are aligned with the summer solstice, is particularly noteworthy. If the circle was part of a calendar system, its abandonment may be linked to a shift in the importance of rituals or a shift in cultural paradigm. Historically, sanctuaries have sometimes lost their significance as a result of internal reforms, and residents may abandon them to embrace a new worldview. Nabta Playa remains a space where archaeology meets mystery. The disappearance of its builders was not death or destruction, but a vanishing without a trace, as if they had vanished into the desert. Perhaps they migrated east, to the Nile, to become the founders of future civilizations. Or perhaps they left their stone circles as a sign of a completed cycle, indicating their purpose fulfilled. But until science finds a definitive answer, Nabta Playa remains one of the most enigmatic disappearances of the ancient world. The mystery of the Ica stones. The Ica stones, discovered in the Peruvian desert near the city of Ica, have long been one of the most controversial archaeological mysteries. These smooth volcanic boulders are engraved with a variety of images, from animals and humans to scenes that some researchers believe could not have been created in antiquity. While mainstream science considers most of the finds to be later forgeries dating back to the 20th century, many questions remain surrounding the stones, puzzling archaeologists, historians, and enthusiasts of ancient civilizations. Some of the images appear quite ordinary: geometric patterns, hunting scenes, primitive figures. But others depict animals long extinct on Earth, including dinosaurs, as well as complex medical procedures resembling organ transplants or surgical interventions. These images have sparked a wave of controversy and theories. Some consider them evidence of a lost ancient civilization, while others believe them to be the product of invention and commercial activity by local residents. One of the most striking features of the stones is their broad subject matter. If they were a single ancient collection, it would be logical to expect a unified cultural style or symbolic system. But the boulders display a variety of engraving styles, from rough lines to polished images executed with high precision. This makes the stones resemble a multi-layered archive accumulated by different artists in different periods. But there is no archaeological evidence of such a process. Some researchers have attempted to analyze the patinated layer to determine the age of the engravings. However, the results have been contradictory. Patina is present, but it can be artificially accelerated using methods available even to amateur craftsmen. This makes it difficult to confidently determine the age of the images. However, the collection includes stones that clearly appear older than their mass-produced 20th century counterparts. There is evidence that stones were found in excavations long before they became a commercial commodity, but this information is fragmentary. Local residents claim that their ancestors had found stones with drawings near old riverbeds, but there is almost no written evidence of this. Some archaeologists admit that a small portion of the stones may be genuinely ancient, but that a whole market of counterfeits subsequently emerged around them, blurring the true origins of the finds. There's a deeper aspect to the mystery. Some of the carvings clearly reflect knowledge that shouldn't have been available to ancient people. On one stone, dinosaur-like figures interact with humans. Another depicts a man performing a complex operation alongside unknown instruments. Skeptics believe such scenes are the product of the imagination of modern engravers inspired by 20th century popular culture. However, the question remains: why do some stones appear so skillfully crafted and show signs of wear, as if they've truly been used for a long time? There's also the idea that the Ica stones may reflect ancient myths or symbolic systems, which the engravers recorded on the stone in the form of deliberately fantastical images. In this case, the depictions of dinosaurs or complex operations could have been metaphorical rather than literal. However, symbolists are troubled by the overly concrete nature of the drawings. Animals and actions are depicted with great precision, which is more typical of recording real events or observations. The area around Ica has long been considered a zone of strange phenomena. Here, in the desert, is the famous Nazca Line, a site associated with enormous geoglyphs. Some theorists propose that the Ica stones are part of a larger cultural tradition, perhaps lost due to climate change or migration. If such a culture existed, the stones could have been a portable archive of knowledge created before the collapse of society. Despite the general skepticism, it's difficult to dismiss the Ica stones mystery entirely as a modern hoax. The collection is vast, and some specimens demonstrate techniques difficult for the average artisan to replicate. Perhaps some of the stones are genuinely ancient, and their sensational content is a modern superstructure on an older phenomenon. Or perhaps we're looking at an example of how folk tradition can unexpectedly intertwine with archaeology, creating a hybrid zone between authenticity and fiction. Thus, the mystery of the Ica stones remains unsolved. They may be entirely modern, partially ancient, or even reflect a lost cultural tradition unknown to mainstream science. The fact that they continue to arouse interest and debate only speaks to humanity's continued quest to discover traces of forgotten knowledge and understand what truths might have been encoded in these stone messages. Resonance of the temples of Malta. The temple complexes of Malta, Najdra, Hagar Kim, Tarxian, and especially the enigmatic Hal-Saflieni hypogam have long puzzled archaeologists with their unusual design. These structures, constructed from gigantic stone blocks and carefully crafted slabs, are unique in the world in their architectural design and acoustic properties. Among the many mysteries surrounding them, the phenomenon of resonance, low-frequency vibrations that occur within the chambers when the human voice is heard, holds a special place. Researchers still debate whether this was a coincidence or the result of deliberate engineering decisions by the ancient builders. The Hal-Saflieni hypogam is an underground temple descending 3 levels. Scientists have discovered a strange effect within its chambers. Certain vocal frequencies cause a persistent resonance capable of influencing human perception. This effect is particularly pronounced in the so-called oracle room, where even the whisper of a male voice transforms into a deep hum that permeates the entire structure. Some researchers claim that being in this space under certain vibrations can affect a person's physiological state, causing a sensation of floating, altered consciousness, or even temporary disorientation. This phenomenon has given rise to the hypothesis that the builders of Maltese temples may have consciously utilized acoustics as part of their ritual practices. However, this would have required a knowledge of sound and architectural geometry, which mainstream archaeology is reluctant to attribute to Neolithic cultures. Nevertheless, analysis of the stone surfaces reveals that some areas were crafted with unusual precision, and their placement clearly corresponds to the formation of sound reflections. This combination of precision and scale suggests a deliberate design. There is a theory that the resonant properties of temples could have been used for initiation rituals or for connecting with another state of consciousness. In ancient cultures, sound often served as a mediator between the physical and spiritual worlds. If priestly groups possessing specialized knowledge existed in Malta, then the architecture of the temples may have reflected their sacred practices. Perhaps resonance served as a means of creating a sense of divine presence or the voice of spirits in ritual participants. Another mystery is that the acoustics of some temples affect the human brain in the frequency range of approximately 110 Hz, a frequency that, according to research, can alter neural activity and create a trance-like effect. Importantly, this frequency is easily reproduced by the human voice. This suggests that ancient priests may have been specifically trained to pronounce sounds that enhance resonance and influence ceremonial participants. However, the question remains, how could the builders achieve such precision in creating acoustic effects? This required observation, experimentation, and perhaps centuries of accumulated experience. Malta does indeed contain a large number of megalithic complexes, and it's possible that their architectural evolution reflects the gradual development of sacred engineering. Archaeologists also note that many temples are aligned with astronomical events. sunrise on the solstices, or other celestial phenomena. This may indicate a complex system of rituals that included not only sound, but also light. A ray of sunlight entering a particular chamber could be amplified by resonant vibrations, creating an effect perceived as a divine omen. The integration of light and sound into the architecture of a Neolithic complex seems unlikely, but the evidence points in that direction. Another important aspect is the sense of space. In some hypogam chambers, sound is perceived differently. Voices aren't simply reflected, but seem to pass through the walls. This creates the sensation of multiple sound sources, even though the actual voice belongs to a single person. Perhaps the ancient inhabitants of Malta used this structure to create the illusion of the presence of spirits or ancestors whose voices were believed to echo in the walls. Interestingly, almost no weapons or traces of mass graves have been found in Malta's temple complexes, indicating their purely ritualistic use. According to the ritual acoustic theory, these structures were intended for rites associated with the passage of souls or mystical initiations, where voice and vibration served as key tools for altering perception. Despite modern research, many aspects of the temple's resonance remain unexplained. Their architecture is too complex to be random, yet too unique to be easily compared to other cultures. Malta seems to represent a foreign island of knowledge, traces of which are found nowhere else. Perhaps we are dealing with a culture that possessed skills that were subsequently lost for millennia. Thus, the resonance of Malta's temples is not simply a physical phenomenon, but part of a profound mystery encompassing architecture, rituals, and possibly lost ways of interacting with sound. These temples continue to amaze with their effect, as if left to remind future generations of the knowledge once held by people whose voices still seem to resonate in stone. Tunnels under Stadtberg. Mount Stadtberg, hidden in the alpine ranges of Central Europe, has long attracted the attention of researchers due to numerous evidence of underground passages extending deep beneath the rock. According to local residents and some speleologists, these tunnels have a strange configuration. They are partially natural, but in some sections, traces of workmanship are visible, as if the stone was shaped with tools superior in precision to the traditional methods of ancient miners. Official archaeology only partially acknowledges the existence of such passages, considering them the result of natural processes or later mining operations. However, many details contradict this theory. The first thing that raises confusion is the depth and direction of the tunnels. They extend tens of meters below the surface, often located in areas where no mining activity has occurred. Some shafts do indeed show signs of medieval mining, but next to them, narrow, perfectly smooth corridors are discovered, leading in unknown directions. These corridors are too smooth to be considered entirely natural and too old to be modern engineering work. Their purpose remains unknown. Speleologists attempting to penetrate deeper have encountered a phenomenon known as void echoes. The sound expands in some places, as if the space behind the wall is significantly larger than it appears. This suggests the presence of hidden chambers or halls, perhaps blocked by rubble or artificially concealed. There are also stories of unusual cold air currents emerging in the tunnels, which may indicate an extensive underground system with exits far beyond the mountain. Some researchers speculate that an ancient network of passages may exist beneath Stadtberg, created long before the emergence of modern European states. This idea is supported by the discovery of worked stones set into the walls and round holes resembling ventilation or drainage systems. If such a network did exist, it could have belonged to a vanished culture whose traces have been so obscured by time that it is difficult to determine their origin. Legends associated with the mountain are also of interest. Medieval chronicles mention underground passages in which the footsteps of those long gone are heard. Locals reported strange sounds emanating from inaccessible sections of the tunnels and rare instances of shepherds or hunters discovering holes in the ground leading to dark corridors. These stories are often dismissed as folklore, but geological surveys confirm the presence of underground voids not shown on modern maps. The structure of some tunnels deserves special attention. They are trapezoidal in shape, with slightly curved walls. These details are reminiscent of architectural elements found in megalithic cultures, although Mount Stadtberg is not among the regions where such structures are documented. Some researchers draw parallels between these corridors and prehistoric underground passages found in Central Europe, known as Erdstole, long, narrow tunnels whose origins are unclear. However, the tunnels beneath Mount Stadtberg appear to be significantly more complex. In one of the caves, walls were discovered covered in a strange grinding pattern, as if the stone had been worked not with metal, but with some kind of abrasive tool of unknown composition. This raises questions, as such processing methods are typical of much later eras and have no analogues in local archaeological layers. Some theorists suggest the possible use of primitive forms of sandblasting or organic abrasives, but there is no direct evidence for this. A faint, barely detectable electromagnetic radiation was measured in several tunnels. It is too weak to be man-made and too stable to be considered a random geological effect. Some ufologists and proponents of alternative archaeology suggest that ancient energy structures or natural resonance zones may lie beneath Stadtberg. Skeptics, however, believe this is due to the interaction of local minerals with groundwater, but research on this topic is still limited. The most intriguing section is what speleologists call the fracture chamber. There, the tunnel leads to a low passage, then turns sharply and widens into a room whose walls are covered in mysterious symbols. They don't resemble any known script, but appear as consistent marks carved with precision, as if on a pre-calculated grid. Official archaeology is reluctant to recognize them as ancient, considering them either modern or the product of natural cracks. However, researchers note the regularity of the geometry, which is difficult to explain by natural processes. Another theory suggests that the tunnels may have been part of an ancient system of shelters created during a period of climatic upheaval. If Europe did experience periods of sharp cold snaps or geomagnetic storms, people may have sought protection underground. In this case, Stadtberg could have been one such shelter, where entire groups of people once retreated. However, no direct evidence of underground habitation has yet been found. There are no traces of fires, camps, or storage areas. Despite decades of research, the tunnels beneath Stadtberg remain a mystery. They combine features of natural and artificial structures, hint at engineering solutions uncharacteristic of known ancient European cultures, and contain elements that raise more questions than answers. Perhaps they are traces of forgotten peoples who migrated across Europe before the advent of written history. Perhaps they are part of a natural structure that humans exploited and then abandoned without a trace. But until definitive proof is available, Stadtberg continues to hold its secrets, a reminder that even in the hearts of explored regions, underground worlds may be hidden, whose builders have vanished, leaving only traces of their tunnels deep beneath the stone. Stone spheres of Costa Rica. The stone spheres of Costa Rica are among the most enigmatic archaeological finds in Central America. These perfectly rounded monoliths, found in the Diquis Delta and other regions, continue to baffle researchers with their shape, weight, and distribution. Most of the spheres are made of granodiorite, an extremely hard rock that requires tremendous effort to shape. Some reach several meters in diameter and weigh tens of tons, while others barely fit in the palm of your hand. The main question that remains open is, why did ancient craftsmen create such precise, perfect shapes? The first spheres were discovered in the 20th century during a land clearing for banana plantations. Workers stumbled upon dozens of half-buried stone spheres, sometimes arranged in complex patterns. Many spheres, unfortunately, were damaged or moved before archaeologists could intervene. However, even the remaining collection, hundreds of pieces, demonstrates astonishing precision. Some spheres deviate from the ideal shape by no more than millimeters, astonishing even modern stoneworking experts. There are many hypotheses about the purpose of the stone spheres. Official archaeology suggests they may have been used as status symbols, ritual markers, or planning elements in ancient settlements. In some places, the spheres were arranged along straight lines or formed regular geometric patterns. This may indicate a connection with astronomical observations or landmarks aimed at specific points on the horizon, such as sunrise on the equinoxes. However, there are more puzzling theories. Some researchers believe the precision of the sphere's manufacture is too high for simple ritual objects. To create such a sphere, craftsmen would have had to process the granodiorite through repeated heating, grinding, and striking, which is impossible without sophisticated skills and tools. Interestingly, no traces of metal tools have been found on the spheres, raising the question, how did the ancient Costa Ricans achieve such high precision? One hypothesis is the use of sand as an abrasive, combined with rolling techniques. The spheres were perhaps rolled along ditches filled with sand, creating a gradual leveling effect. However, for large spheres, this would have required enormous effort and the participation of many people. There is evidence that the spheres could have been transported over considerable distances. Some lie far from the quarrying sites. This suggests a highly organized society capable of transporting multi-ton objects. Local legends suggest that the spheres are stone eggs of the gods or frozen lightning bolts. Such imagery may reflect ancient notions of cosmology. The sphere as a symbol of a celestial body, an ideal form connecting earth and heaven. Perhaps this is the reason for their creation. In this context, the stone spheres could have been used in religious ceremonies associated with the cycles of time and the movement of the stars. Some researchers believe the spheres may have been part of a larger complex, in which the stone objects formed a map of the celestial constellations. Similar ideas have been raised regarding other megalithic structures around the world, and although there is no direct evidence, the symmetry of the sphere's arrangement is truly striking. Another controversial theory is that the spheres may have been connected to acoustic experiments. Their shape suggests that, under certain conditions, they could have been used to generate sound waves or resonance. However, evidence for this is still insufficient, although studies of similar effects in other regions of the world have shown that ancient cultures may have deliberately used stone for sound-producing purposes. Unfortunately, much of the context has been lost. Many spheres were moved, broken, or flattened by tractors during the period when they were considered an obstacle. This makes it difficult to understand their original compositions. However, surviving documents and photographs indicate that some groups of spheres formed long lines pointing towards specific points in the landscape, possibly mountain peaks used as landmarks. Another interesting detail is the sphere's connection to ancient settlements. In some cases, they were located near houses, but in others, far from populated areas. This raises the question, were they part of a sacred space accessible only to certain members of society? Or did they serve as markers of territories, boundaries, or routes? The question of when they were created also remains open. Precise dating of the spheres is difficult, as it is impossible to determine from the stones themselves. Archaeologists rely on the context of the finds, linking them to the Diquis culture, which existed from approximately 700 BC. However, it is possible that some spheres are significantly older and were reused by subsequent generations. Thus, the stone spheres of Costa Rica remain an enigma, intertwining engineering mastery, cultural symbols, and lost knowledge. Their true purpose remains unknown. Perhaps they reflected the cosmology of an ancient people, were used in rituals, or served as part of a larger architectural system. Regardless, these perfect stone forms continue to amaze with their precision and mystery. A reminder that even in relatively recent American history, there were cultures whose knowledge and aspirations were far more complex than commonly believed. Mines of Serapeum. The first mystery is the precision of the granite sarcophagi. Their interior surfaces are polished to a mirror shine, The corners are perfectly square, and the lids fit so precisely that they form a nearly airtight seal. Modern craftsmen would require sophisticated technology to achieve such precision, but the Egyptians of the New Kingdom did not possess steel or diamond tools. This begs the question, how were they able to craft the hard Aswan granite with such impeccable precision? The second puzzling aspect concerns the transport of the massive sarcophagi. Given their size and weight, moving them even horizontally would have been a formidable task. But at the Serapeum, they weren't simply carried, they were lowered into the underground chambers through long corridors, which themselves required highly precise engineering. How were the ancient builders able to accomplish this? Some suggest the use of lubricated tracks, others complex systems of levers or wooden structures. But none of these methods explain why the walls and floor show no signs of wear typical of moving such heavy objects. The third mystery concerns their purpose. If the sarcophagi were intended for bulls, why were their lids tightly closed but with no obvious signs of tampering? No remains were found inside many of the sarcophagi, calling into question their funerary function. Some researchers believe the sarcophagi may have been used not for burial, but for storing or isolating materials requiring special conditions. For example, alternative archaeology abounds with theories that the sarcophagi may have contained important ritual objects or even some form of energy. The acoustics of the underground corridors are particularly noteworthy. Unlike temple spaces, where sound is amplified, in the Serapeum it is dampened. This creates a sense of presence in a space designed for silence. Some researchers believe the Serapeum may have served as a site for ritual ceremonies associated with the transition between worlds. It is generally accepted that the ancient Egyptians placed great importance on the afterlife, and the complex may have been part of sacred architecture, designed to protect or isolate what was considered essential to maintaining world order. Another mystery is geological. The Serapeum is located in a limestone massif, but traces of high temperatures have been found in some parts. This may indicate the use of fire during construction or some unknown technology. However, the traces of heat exposure are limited and do not correspond to large-scale firing. What exactly happened in these chambers remains unclear. There is also a hypothesis that the Serapeum was not originally associated with the Apis cult, but was reinterpreted by the Egyptians later. This explains why the structures are so complex, while their ritual use is so superficially described in the sources. Perhaps the complex is much older than it appears, and the creators of the sarcophagi belong to an entirely different era, whose knowledge has been lost or forgotten. An interesting aspect also relates to the complex's location. The Serapeum is located in close proximity to other mysterious structures at Saqqara, including ruined pyramids and unknown underground galleries. This suggests the existence of a unified system of underground architecture that the Egyptians utilized and modified. Perhaps the Serapeum is just part of an ancient complex extending deep beneath the Saqqara Plateau. Researchers are also paying attention to tool marks visible on the granite surfaces of the sarcophagi. In some cases, they resemble machine marks, parallel lines, perfectly straight and uniform. This fact is particularly puzzling. Such marks cannot be explained by the use of copper or stone tools. Bold theories are emerging about the use of vibration methods, sophisticated abrasives, or even technologies based on sound or resonance. Some scholars suggest that sarcophagi may have served not as containers, but as instruments, perhaps related to acoustics, vibration, or energetic phenomena. Their enormous mass and precise shapes may have allowed for the creation of specific resonant states. Similar ideas are also found in pyramid studies, which suggest that the inner chambers could have been used not only for burial, but also for energetic purposes. There's also a theory that the Serapeum may have served as a library or repository of knowledge. If the sarcophagi did indeed contain important texts or objects requiring protection, their massive size could have been part of the preservation mechanism. However, the lack of finds in most of the sarcophagi raises questions. Were they looted in antiquity, or were they never used for their intended purpose? Thus, the shafts of Serapeum remain one of the most enigmatic structures of ancient Egypt. Their engineering complexity, inexplicable precision of execution, and unclear purpose raise questions that remain unanswered. Perhaps these underground chambers are an echo of knowledge lost by civilizations that lived long before the Egyptians. Or perhaps they remain an unexplained part of an ancient cult, the meaning of which has been completely lost to us in the mists of time. Tunnels under Saqqara. Beneath the Saqqara Plateau, Egypt's ancient necropolis, lies a network of underground passages stretching for many kilometers. This site has long been the subject of research, debate, and legend. Chambers, corridors, shafts, and areas whose origins raise more questions than answers have been discovered here. Official archaeology recognizes only a portion of the structures, attributing them to various eras of the Old Kingdom, Middle Kingdom, and Ptolemaic period. However, numerous data indicate that a much older and much larger structure exists beneath Saqqara. This deep network of tunnels remains one of the greatest mysteries of Egyptology. One of the first researchers to raise the question of Saqqara's underground structures was Auguste Mariette, who discovered the famous Serapeum in the 19th century. However, his notes contain references to other passages leading deeper, but access to them was limited or dangerous. Modern expeditions using ground-penetrating radar are discovering anomalies beneath the surface, enormous voids, straight corridors, and structures that don't fit within known archaeological layers. This suggests that part of Saqqara's underground world remains unexplored. A particular mystery lies in the rectilinear corridors located beneath multi-meter-thick limestone layers. They are not directly connected to the pyramids of Djoser or Unas, although they are located in their immediate vicinity. Some corridors are perfectly aligned along the north-south or east-west axes. This indicates a sophisticated engineering concept requiring advanced measurement methods. But who created these passages and when remains unknown. Researchers believe that beneath Saqqara lies more than just a network of tunnels, but an ancient system for recording, storing, and transmitting knowledge, a kind of underground academy that existed long before the dynasties of Egypt. This hypothesis is supported by the discovery of strange niches located at regular intervals and showing no signs of burial. They resemble storage cells for objects, possibly scrolls or tablets. However, since Saqqara is extremely low in humidity, organic matter could have been preserved, yet almost nothing has been found. This suggests that the chambers were emptied or evacuated in ancient times. Another mystery is the resonance passages, corridors in which sound propagates in an unusual manner. Researchers note that some areas beneath Saqqara exhibit properties that amplify low frequencies. This is reminiscent of the acoustics discovered in the hypogeums of Malta. This raises the question, was there once a civilization that possessed knowledge of the sonic properties of stone and applied this knowledge to various parts of the world? No less intriguing are reports of underground lakes found in some of Saqqara's restricted areas. These small, almost motionless pools reflect the ceilings of the chambers like mirrors. Their origin is unclear. Underground water is rare in this region. Some suggest they are part of an ancient cooling or humidification system, possibly related to ritual processes. Others believe these lakes are the result of natural processes, although their placement is too precise to be accidental. One of the most enigmatic sections is the so-called Deep Corridor, mentioned in the notes of several archaeologists. It lies beneath a layer of rock dating to the Old Kingdom, but its walls reveal signs of processing distinct from Egyptian techniques. The stone surface appears to have been polished in an unusual manner, leaving microscopic marks reminiscent of high-grade vibration or abrasive processing. Interestingly, modern researchers who have entered this corridor have noted a strange feeling of disorientation and pressure, as if the space itself were influencing perception. Some theorists believe the tunnels beneath Saqqara may have been part of an ancient energy or information system. This is also supported by the complex's location on a plateau where the geology facilitates the propagation of sound and vibration waves. Perhaps ancient engineers exploited the properties of stone and voids to achieve goals we have no idea about. This sounds speculative, but the scientific community is increasingly recognizing that some ancient structures were clearly designed with the physical properties of materials and the environment in mind. There is also a theory that the tunnels beneath Saqqara are connected to the myth of the ancient Hall of Records, a place where knowledge about the origins of humanity, along with texts or devices that survived the flood or other cataclysms, were supposedly hidden. Although there is no direct evidence, many researchers note the similarities between Egyptian myths about hidden kingdoms and the real-life underground chambers of Saqqara. Perhaps the legends of underground halls originate from real structures whose origins are forgotten. Some researchers claim that there are levels beneath Saqqara that have never been reached. Ground-penetrating radar detects voids up to 40 meters beneath existing tunnels. However, excavations to such depths require enormous resources and are fraught with the risk of collapse. Therefore, much of the underground world remains sealed and inaccessible. But the very idea of a multi-layered structure beneath the necropolis adds to the mystery. Perhaps Saqqara is just the tip of the iceberg of an ancient underground complex. As for official scholarship, it favors cautious interpretations. Some tunnels are ancient burial galleries, some are limestone mines, and others are unfinished construction projects. However, in reality, there are too many structures beneath Saqqara that don't fit such explanations. Their age is unknown, their purpose is controversial, and their origin casts doubt on the traditional chronology. Thus, the tunnels beneath Saqqara remain one of Egypt's greatest archaeological mysteries. They represent a complex, multi-layered structure, possibly centuries old, created using knowledge and technologies we can only guess at. Perhaps in the future, new research methods will help unravel this mystery. But for now, Saqqara guards its underground secrets, as if preserving the traces of civilizations that vanished long before the rise of the known Egyptian kingdoms. Stone platforms of Nan Madol. Nan Madol, located on the island of Pohnpei in Micronesia, has long been called the ancient city on the water and the Polynesian Atlantis. This complex, covering over 200 hectares, consists of dozens of artificial islands connected by canals and gigantic stone platforms constructed from basalt blocks, resembling enormous hexagonal columns. The scale, construction technology, and enigmatic purpose of Nan Madol's structures make it one of the most enigmatic megalithic sites in the world. The main puzzle is how the island's ancient inhabitants managed to move and install the multi-ton stone columns quarried on the other side of the island. The basalt columns used to build the platforms are up to several meters long and weigh, on average, between 5 and 20 tons. Some weigh even more. Researchers immediately face the question, how did the island's inhabitants, lacking metal, the wheel, and beasts of burden, manage to transport such heavy stones through dense jungle and swampy terrain? One theory is that the columns were moved along specially prepared routes using wooden rollers or salas. However, the geology of the area and terrain analysis indicate that many areas were impassable for such structures. There is also a legend that the builders of Nan Madol may have used a flying stone. Pohnpeian oral traditions claim that the stones were lifted into the air by the power of magic or sound. While this theory cannot serve as a scientific explanation, it reflects the locals' perception of the structure's incredible heaviness and their long-standing awe at the ancient construction. Some modern researchers believe the legends may conceal allegorical knowledge about physical methods of moving the stones, perhaps using buoyancy or vibration. The city itself is built on a coral reef where platform after platform creates a complex system of fortifications intersected by channels. Some of the islets have a perfectly geometric shape, testifying to the meticulous planning of the territory and the thoughtfulness of the entire architecture. Remarkably, Nan Madol is located not on land, but on water, as if the builders wanted to create a city separated from the rest of the world, surrounded by natural defenses. One of the mysteries is the purpose of Nan Madol. The official version suggests that it served as the residence of the Sodelur dynasty, rulers of Pohnpei who ruled the island before the European period. However, archaeological research shows that construction of the complex began long before the Sodelurs. Moreover, the level of craftsmanship and the scale of the structure far exceed the capabilities of the Sodelur culture, casting doubt on their primacy. Some researchers believe Nan Madol may have been the center of rituals related to astronomy. The placement of platforms and the orientation of some structures align with the trajectories of certain celestial bodies. This may indicate the creation of an ancient observatory or sacred space oriented toward the stars. Water, acting as a natural mirror, enhanced the reflection of celestial objects, which could have been used in rituals. Another surprising aspect is the lack of traces of traditional Polynesian agricultural activity within the city itself. This suggests that Nan Madol was not a typical settlement center, but rather served a specific purpose. Perhaps the island's inhabitants came here only for rituals, gatherings, or other sacred activities. This explains the absence of domestic buildings and the large number of monumental structures. The distribution of the platforms by level of significance is also intriguing. The most massive and difficult-to-reach structures are located in the center, including the famous burial platform of Nan Dawes. The complexity of the structure and its isolation from the other islets hint at the special significance of this site. Some researchers speculate that it may have housed the most important relics or even the remains of legendary leaders. Besides the platforms, the system of channels is worth noting. They didn't simply serve as a means of transportation between the islets. Their depth and orientation indicate a carefully designed hydrodynamic system. Some channels remain the same depth even after thousands of years, despite erosion and fluctuating water levels. This demonstrates the engineering mastery of Nan Madol's creators, who understood the ebb and flow of the tides and the movement of water around the reefs. Analysis of the stone blocks reveals that the columns were placed in specific sequences, as if they had not only structural but also symbolic significance. Some blocks stand vertically, others horizontally, creating a system of locks that prevent the building from collapsing. This is reminiscent of the interlocking techniques found in Peruvian structures, raising questions about possible connections or parallel architectural traditions that developed independently. One of the mysteries, long debated by researchers, is why building a city on water was chosen as the preferred option. Perhaps this decision was not only spiritual, but also practical. The islands protected the center of power from attack, provided security, and also symbolized mastery over nature. Water may have acted as a purifying substance, separating the sacred world from the mundane. But despite the many hypotheses, none fully explains all aspects of Nan Madol, neither the origin of the basalt columns, nor the methods of their transportation, nor the purpose of such a large-scale complex. This site remains unique, almost outside the categories of known cultures. Some believe Nan Madol is the remains of an older civilization predating the oceanic peoples. Others believe it is the result of several construction phases, reflecting the transfer of knowledge from one culture to another. Nan Madol remains inexplicable even to modern researchers. It appears to be a city built using engineering knowledge lost in later eras and bears traces of sacred geometry incomprehensible to modern humans. Perhaps Nan Madol is one of the rare examples of ancient technologies whose meaning we can only guess at. Labyrinth of Hathor. The Hawara Labyrinth, located near the Fayum Oasis, has fascinated researchers for centuries. Ancient historians, including Herodotus and Strabo, described it as a colossal structure with thousands of chambers, halls, and corridors, surpassing even the pyramids in grandeur. But only traces of the labyrinth itself remain today, ruins hidden under sand and rare fragments of stonework. Everything else seems to have vanished, as if swallowed by the earth. This mystery has become one of the most intriguing in the history of ancient Egypt. According to Herodotus, the labyrinth consisted of 12 courtyards and a vast number of chambers, spread across 2 levels, an upper and a lower one. He claimed that the lower level was inaccessible to ordinary people, and its secrets were known only to priests. This description raises a host of questions. How could the Egyptians have built such a massive underground complex? Why did the builders choose to create a structure so easy to get lost in? And what was the purpose of such a grandiose project? Modern research shows that traces of a massive structure occupying tens of thousands of square meters are indeed hidden beneath the sand. Ground-penetrating radar surveys indicate the presence of linear corridors, chambers, and massive walls extending deep into the earth. However, most of these remain inaccessible due to high groundwater levels, complicating excavations. The paradox is that we know of the structure's existence, yet we are unable to physically penetrate its interior. Some archaeologists believe the labyrinth was more than just an architectural structure, but a symbolic reflection of the world order. Egyptian priests may have used it for initiation rites, where candidates had to navigate a complex system of chambers symbolizing a spiritual journey. In this case, the architecture had a sacred significance. Passages, dead ends, and a multi-level structure reflected the soul's journey to the afterlife. The labyrinth may have served not only as a ritual site, but also as a training ground for priests and rulers. Another mystery of the labyrinth relates to its possible function as an archive. Some researchers suggest that its lower levels house the documentary records of ancient Egypt, texts, tablets, and scrolls dealing with history, astronomy, medicine, and other knowledge. This explains why access to the lower level was restricted. If the so-called Hall of Records truly existed, the labyrinth could have been not only a ritual complex, but also a knowledge storage center, a precursor to the libraries of the ancient world. However, if the labyrinth was a repository of such valuable information, the question arises: where did it all disappear to? Some believe the labyrinth was destroyed in ancient times by earthquakes or floods. Others believe that some of its chambers were deliberately sealed and remain hidden from view. Perhaps entire floors of chambers exist beneath the earth, accessible only after extensive engineering work. There are also more daring theories linking the labyrinth to technologies unknown to modern science. Some researchers point to unusual stone slabs found nearby. Their surfaces bear marks reminiscent of high temperature or vibratory tooling. This suggests that the builders of Hawara possessed a technology that allowed them to process stone so smoothly that it became the ideal material for creating long corridors and vast halls. Remarkably, the pyramid of Amenemhat III is located near the labyrinth. It is believed that the labyrinth and pyramid were part of a single architectural complex, in which the pyramid served as an external symbol of power, and the labyrinth as an internal center of power and knowledge. In this case, the underground levels could have been no less important than the above-ground ones. Another intriguing detail is the near-perfect symmetry described in ancient descriptions. If the reconstructions are accurate, the labyrinth was built with a mathematical precision reminiscent of later Greek and Roman structures. This raises questions about the possible influence or common roots of architectural traditions. Some researchers note that the Hawara labyrinth may have been part of a system, including canals, reservoirs, and a complex water management system. This is supported by its proximity to the Fayum Oasis, a region where the Egyptians implemented their finest hydraulic engineering projects. It's possible that the labyrinth served not only ritual or administrative purposes, but was also part of an engineering system controlling water levels in the region. But one of the strangest phenomena of the labyrinth is its disappearance. How could such a grandiose structure, described by dozens of authors, vanish almost without a trace? Desert sands absorb much, but not quickly enough to conceal an entire architectural complex in a single generation. Perhaps the labyrinth was deliberately destroyed to conceal its secrets from subsequent eras. Or perhaps it was gradually eroded by groundwater, losing its structure until it was reduced to rubble. Thus, the Labyrinth of Hawara remains one of the most mystical enigmas of ancient Egypt. Its size, purpose, and architecture make it unique among ancient structures. It could have been a temple, an archive, an initiation center, an engineering hub, or even all of these at once. Its disappearance from reality, yet its survival in legend, makes it one of the most fascinating ancient sites, still awaiting its true discovery. The Lost City of Ubar. The Lost City of Ubar, known in Arab legends as the Atlantis of the Desert or the Iram of the Pillars, has become one of the most discussed archaeological mysteries of the Middle East. Even in ancient times, Arab legends and Quranic texts told of a thriving city, rich in incense and caravan trade, which was destroyed for its hubris and disappeared beneath the sands. For a long time, historians considered Ubar a myth, analogous to mythical cities like El Dorado or Shambhala. However, satellite images and archaeological research in the late 20th century revealed that traces of an ancient caravan hub do indeed lie beneath the sands of Oman. And while the discovered ruins do not provide a complete answer to the question of ancient Ubar, they open the door to a much deeper and more mysterious history of the region. The first thing that strikes researchers is the city's location. Ubar stood at the crossroads of ancient trade routes, along which caravans transported frankincense, a valuable resin used for rituals, medicine, and trade. The region was strategically important, and the city's prosperity was inevitable. However, it is also known that significant climatic shifts occurred here. Depletion of water resources, shifting sands, and the emergence of enormous desert dunes could have significantly altered the landscape. This suggests that the city's disappearance was linked not only to legends of divine punishment, but also to real geological processes. One of the most important archaeological discoveries was the discovery of deep sinkholes, or karst pits, into which the city's structures likely partially collapsed. This discovery became the key to the hypothesis that Ubar was built on unstable ground. When the underground cavities collapsed, the city could have been partially submerged. Combined with the shifting sands of the Rub al-Khali, this made it virtually invisible. It is possible that this cataclysm is the basis for the legend of the city, swallowed by the earth by the will of heaven. However, archaeological finds don't explain all aspects of the legends. Local legends claim that Ubar was surrounded by tall pillars or towers, which served as a symbol of its wealth and power. These pillars may have been watchtowers or religious structures, but their architecture is not fully understood. Some researchers believe they may have resembled megalithic columns or even obelisks. If such structures truly existed, the city's disappearance would have been even more dramatic. Entire stone towers could have disappeared beneath the sands. There are also more unusual theories linking Ubar to vanished civilizations that may have existed before the known cultures of Arabia. This is supported by the discovery of strange artifacts, stone objects whose function is unknown, and whose style differs from known regional traditions. Perhaps Ubar was the center of a culture that subsequently vanished, leaving behind only fragments. If so, the legends of punishment may be merely a later interpretation of an older memory of a catastrophe. Also worth noting is the region's geological mystery, a strange combination of oases and desert lands, sharp terrain changes, and underground rivers. Some researchers suggest that Ubar may have been built near a water source that eventually dried up or changed its course. This would have rendered the city uninhabited, even without catastrophic destruction. However, archaeological evidence indicates that the city was abandoned suddenly, not gradually. This suddenness has given rise to numerous theories, including the impact of external forces or natural disasters such as earthquakes. Interestingly, Ubar was long considered not just a city, but a gateway to a hidden world. Arab travelers wrote that Ubar was a city opening the way to lost lands that no one could see. Perhaps this reflects the trade routes that extended deep into the desert or points to the city's special significance as a crossroads. But it's also possible that some of these notions arose after the city's destruction, when its ruins became the site of legends and mystical stories. Most intriguing are the traces of gigantic temporal cycles associated with climate change. Some geologists believe the region experienced a period of abrupt desiccation, rendering the area almost uninhabitable. This could have been due to shifting wind patterns, the drying up of underground springs, or fluctuations in ocean currents. If these processes coincided with the destruction of urban structures, then Ubar's disappearance could have been part of global climate change that affected numerous civilizations of the time. Another theory suggests Ubar's connection to an ancient network of cities, each center associated with trade and religious rituals. If Ubar was a node in such a network, its disappearance could have had serious consequences for the region. Its destruction may have caused a shift in trade routes or the decline of other cities. This theory allows Ubar to be seen as part of a larger system, the disappearance of which reflects a larger process of cultural degradation in Arabia. Another aspect concerns the architectural features of the ruins. Some of the discovered elements, such as stone foundations, have a precision and shape that are difficult to explain by conventional construction methods. This suggests that construction technologies unknown to modern researchers may have been used. Stoneworking techniques reminiscent of those observed in the megalithic structures of Peru or Egypt may have been employed. Although there is no direct evidence of contact, such parallels raise questions about the possible spread of knowledge. But of all the hypotheses, one remains the most likely. Ubar was destroyed by a combination of natural factors, a sinkhole, shifting sands, and climate change. However, the fact that so many legends arose around Ubar speaks to its exceptional role in the consciousness of the ancient Arabs. It was more than just a city, but a symbol of prosperity, trade, and sacred power. Its disappearance became a metaphor for the fall of pride and the fatality of fate. Today, Ubar remains a symbol of mystery. Its ruins, barely visible on satellite images, recall a city that lived, flourished, and vanished, leaving behind only an echo in the sand. Perhaps future exploration will reveal its secrets. But for now, Ubar remains one of the most enigmatic points on the map of ancient Arabia, a place where myth and reality are so closely intertwined that they are difficult to separate. Tunnels under Derbent. Derbent, one of the oldest cities in Russia and the entire Caucasus region, is famous above all for its Narenkala citadel and the stone walls that seal the narrow passage between the Caspian Sea and the mountains. But beyond the visible architecture lies a far more mysterious layer, a network of underground passages that extend beneath the old city, delve deep into the hills, and, according to some researchers, may be much older than the fortifications themselves. These tunnels, often mentioned in legends, but only partially explored by archaeologists, have become the source of mysterious stories intertwined with real facts and hypotheses about the underground infrastructure of ancient civilizations. The first documented description of Derbent's underground passages dates back to the 19th century, when explorers noted systems of corridors extending toward the Caspian Sea and beneath the Narenkala Acropolis. Some were reinforced with stone, while others appeared to be roughly hewn from the rock. A huge underground cistern, known as the caravanserai, attracted particular attention, though this name is arbitrary. It consists of a chamber with a high vaulted roof, the walls of which are so meticulously crafted that they appear to have been constructed according to a complex architectural design. But the most enigmatic feature is the numerous side corridors leading to hidden niches and narrow wells. Some researchers believe these tunnels were used as strategic communications links connecting the city's defensive structures. However, many sections are too deep, isolated, or narrow to serve as troop movements. Moreover, several corridors run parallel to each other and are located at different levels, creating the impression of a multi-layered structure. This suggests that beneath Derbent there exists an underground complex, created not in a single period, but over the course of many centuries, perhaps even millennia. Of particular interest is the tunnel leading from the citadel to the sea. Its length is unknown, as most of it is buried or collapsed, but the surviving fragments show that it is almost perfectly aligned, and the walls are aligned with remarkable precision. This suggests that the builders possessed knowledge of geometry and engineering. But who were these builders? The official theory dates the main underground structures to the Sasanian period, but many elements appear too ancient for that time. Some researchers speculate that the tunnels may have belonged to a culture that existed in the region long before the Persians arrived. The Caucasus is known for ancient megalithic complexes, mysterious dolmens, and structures dating back over 3,000 years. Perhaps the underground architecture of Derbent is part of this older layer of history. This theory is supported by the discovery of traces of processing, reminiscent of the techniques used in Caucasian dolmens, straight cuts, flat platforms, and neat excavations. Such techniques may have been lost later and are not consistent with Sassanid technology. Furthermore, the legends of the peoples of Dagestan often contain references to underground passages leading to the spirit world or to hidden cities underground. Although such tales are usually considered part of folklore, they sometimes reflect actual memories of structures whose purpose has been forgotten. Some elders claim to have descended into old underground passages as children, but some of them were subsequently sealed. This suggests that part of the network was intentionally sealed, either in ancient times or in historical times, for reasons of danger or secrecy. But Derbent's mysteries aren't limited to its architecture. Some researchers have noted strange acoustic effects within the tunnels. In some rooms, voices are dampened, as if absorbed by the walls, while in others, on the contrary, they are amplified. This is reminiscent of the acoustics of underground complexes in Malta or the temples of Peru. The question arises, could the ancient builders of Derbent have possessed knowledge of the sonic properties of stone and used this knowledge for ritual or technical purposes? Or is this a coincidence dictated by the shape of the rooms? There are also more mystical theories suggesting that beneath Derbent there may have been an ancient underground citadel, a control center, or a shelter created during times of catastrophe, perhaps climate change or invasions. Such shelters are common in Cappadocia, where underground cities extend dozens of levels down. Could a similar tradition have existed in the Caucasus? There's no direct evidence yet, but the configuration of the Derbent tunnels resembles a network of shelters, narrow passages, hidden rooms, ventilation shafts, and passages impossible to find without knowing the exact route. An additional mystery is the lack of inscriptions inside the tunnels. Typically, ancient builders left symbols, markings, or at least traces of their presence. In Derbent, however, the corridors are almost completely silent, creating the impression that the builders deliberately avoided identification or that the underground levels were partially remodeled later, destroying the old markings. Archaeological work in Derbent is complicated by several factors: dense urban development, legal restrictions, and a high water table. This means that a significant portion of the underground world remains inaccessible. However, the fragments that have been studied reveal a complex system of ventilation and drainage, suggesting long-term use of these passages. It is difficult to imagine that such structures were built for temporary purposes, such as shelter during wartime. Their scale and meticulousness suggest a more significant function. Some geologists point to natural cracks and karst voids beneath Derbent. Perhaps ancient builders used these as a foundation, expanding and strengthening the walls. In that case, part of the network could have been natural and part artificial. But even if this is the case, the artificial elements still demonstrate a mastery far beyond the ordinary engineering work of the time. The age of the tunnels remains an open question. There is evidence that some corridors were created in the ancient period, others in the early Middle Ages, and others may be significantly older. These levels could have overlapped and been modified by different cultures, leaving strange inconsistencies in the architecture. This creates the effect of a multi-layered underground history, like an archaeological pie. Perhaps this is precisely the mystery of Derbent. Hidden underground is not a single structure, but a whole series of buildings from different eras, united by geography and the centuries-old tradition of using this territory as a strategic and sacred center. Derbent has always been a gateway between sea and mountains, between east and west. Perhaps its underground passages are yet another gateway, leading to a past about which we know almost nothing. While archaeologists are only exploring the upper levels of these structures, Derbent's underground world continues to hold its secrets. Perhaps one day, technology will allow us to explore the complex's deeper layers and uncover a history stretching back thousands of years. But for now, the tunnels remain a mystery, a silent testimony to the hidden worlds beneath the surface of these ancient cities that we are only just beginning to discover. Stone walls of Sacsayhuaman. Sacsayhuaman, perched on a hill above Cusco, remains one of the most impressive and enigmatic megalithic structures in the Andes. Its gigantic stone blocks, fitted together with incredible precision, appear to have been cut and assembled using technologies beyond those of known civilizations of the era. The walls are composed of massive polygonal stones, some weighing over 100 tons. The surfaces are perfectly smooth, the angles precise, and the joints so tight that it's impossible to insert even a blade between the stones. The first thing that strikes researchers is the diversity of stone block shapes. Each stone is unique: polygonal slabs, complex bevels, curved surfaces, depressions, and projections, allowing them to fit together as if they were parts of a giant puzzle. The Incas, traditionally credited with the construction, used much simpler stonework techniques and more often constructed dry masonry from rectangular blocks. But Sacsayhuaman completely transcends their typical architecture. Some masonry elements are so complex that it's difficult to imagine their creation without preliminary models or drawings. It is hypothesized that Sacsayhuaman is a structure constructed in several stages. Its lower levels are made of enormous megaliths, surpassing in scale and craftsmanship the upper levels, which were undoubtedly built by the Incas. The difference between the styles is so obvious that many researchers believe the lower structures are the legacy of an older civilization that existed long before the rise of the Inca Empire. This culture may have possessed knowledge of the physics of stone, which was lost to later generations. The method of stone processing presents a particular mystery. The surfaces of the blocks are smooth, as if ground with a soft tool, and the corners were worked using methods that allow for near-perfect geometry. However, there are no traces of the use of high-strength metal tools in the Andes, and the known Inca tools could not have been used with the andesite of which the walls are constructed. Some researchers suggest the use of abrasives or heating followed by rapid cooling, which allowed for the separation of the stone pieces. However, these methods do not explain the precise joining of the blocks. Alternative archaeology theories suggest soft stone, a technique that temporarily softened minerals with plant extracts or chemical solutions. These assumptions are based on the observation that some blocks have slightly curved surfaces, as if bent under pressure. However, evidence for such techniques is highly controversial and not supported by experiments. Nevertheless, the idea itself reflects the enigmatic nature of the structure, which cannot be explained within the known historical record. The location of Sacsayhuaman also raises questions. It is built in the form of a crenellated fortress, whose walls follow the contours of the terrain. However, some researchers believe the complex's shape resembles the head of a puma, a sacred animal of the Incas. If so, Sacsayhuaman was not only a fortress, but also part of a gigantic urban symbol, in which Cusco represented the body of a puma and the walls its jaw. This suggests a deeply thoughtful design concept for this sacred space. But it's not just the stones that are of interest. Within the complex are underground passages, tunnels, and caves, some of which are so smooth as to seem artificial. These corridors are often associated with Inca legends of underground routes leading from Sacsayhuaman to the center of Cusco, and even to other cities. There are stories of explorers disappearing within these tunnels, and some parts of the underground system were intentionally buried or sealed. They may have had ritual purposes or served as secret communications. One of the most enigmatic elements of the complex is a sector known as the Rodadero, a smooth stone surface with grooves and slippery depressions. At first glance, it resembles natural erosion patterns, but the lines are too smooth and the shape too regular. Some believe the Rodadero was a place of ritual or teaching. Others believe it is part of an engineering system designed to move water or objects. But there is no definitive explanation for the patterns on the surface. Another mysterious place is the Chincana Zone, which translates from Quechua as place where it's easy to get lost. It's a network of underground passages, some of which have collapsed or were sealed centuries ago. Researchers who have descended into Chincana have noted strange acoustic effects, as well as areas where the temperature changes sharply. Some claim that the underground levels extend hundreds of meters deep. If so, then Sacsayhuaman has a much more complex structure than it appears on the surface. Archaeologists also note strange protrusions and spikes on the surface of some stones. They appear to have been used to lift or secure the blocks during construction. However, after the blocks were installed, these protrusions were not removed, raising the question, why were they left in place? Perhaps they served not only a functional but also a symbolic purpose. Many researchers have noted the extraordinary resilience of the Sacsayhuaman walls. They survived numerous earthquakes that destroyed most of Cusco's buildings, yet remained virtually unscathed. This is due not only to the mass of the blocks, but also to their perfect alignment. The walls function as a single, monolithic body. This engineering feat far exceeds the capabilities of later builders in the region and suggests a highly advanced understanding of structural mechanics. Some geophysicists point to Sacsayhuaman's location relative to fault lines and energy nodes. They believe the megalithic structure may interact with natural vibrations of the Earth's crust. While these ideas remain controversial, they explain the complex's unusual stability and durability. There's also a theory that Sacsayhuaman was part of a larger system, possibly the ancient capital of a pre-Inca culture. According to this theory, the Incas simply adapted the existing structure and used it for their own purposes. Many elements indeed appear to have been rebuilt or reused. Thus, Sacsayhuaman represents an architectural phenomenon where megalithic engineering, sacred geometry, and the mysteries of vanished cultures intersect. Its walls continue to stand, resisting time and the elements, as if preserving the memory of those who possessed knowledge now lost. And perhaps only a small part of this megalithic complex is visible today. The rest lies hidden in the earth and underground passages, awaiting discovery. The riddle of Ollantaytambo. Ollantaytambo is one of Peru's most enigmatic archaeological complexes. Located in the sacred valley of the Incas, it combines elements of fortification architecture, a temple complex, and megalithic structures. But it is its upper sector, known as the Temple of the Sun, that most astonishes researchers. It contains gigantic pink porphyry monoliths, perfectly fitted together, weighing up to 50 tons. As with Sacsayhuaman, many aspects of Ollantaytambo's construction remain unexplained. The first thing that catches one's attention is the precision with which the porphyry is worked. This stone is extremely hard, requiring considerable effort and high-quality tools to work it. but no metal tools have been found in the Andes capable of handling porphyry to the level demonstrated at Ollantaytambo. The surfaces of the monoliths are smooth, the edges precise, and the angles perfect. There are no gaps between the blocks, and they appear to have been formed from a single mass. This astonishes not only modern observers, but also stoneworking experts, who are at a loss to explain the methods used by ancient craftsmen. Even more mysterious is the transportation of the monoliths. The source of the porphyry is located more than 5 kilometers from the complex, on the opposite side of the Urubamba River. To transport the porphyry blocks to an altitude of over 2,600 meters, the builders would have had to overcome steep slopes, deep gorges, and a swift river current. Even today, such a route would be difficult for modern equipment, let alone for people without wheels or draft animals. However, traces in some areas of the terrain indicate that the blocks were indeed hauled along specially carved paths, possibly using a system of ropes and levers. But how exactly this was accomplished remains unclear. At the top of the Ollantaytambo terraces lies a mysterious temple sector composed of 6 enormous porphyry slabs, known as the Wall of the 6 Monoliths. Each slab fits perfectly against the next, with narrow wedge-shaped stone inserts set between them, creating the impression that the entire complex was designed as a single mechanism. Interestingly, some researchers consider this wall unfinished, as if construction was suddenly halted. Why? Perhaps because of an invasion or a catastrophe. Perhaps for reasons that remain unknown. Archaeologists note the unusual structure of Ollantaytambo's terraces. They don't simply follow the contours of the mountain, but form a complex system that controls water flow and prevents erosion. Modern engineers marvel at the precision of the calculations. Each terrace has a unique slope, calculated to distribute water evenly. This system, which has existed for over 500 years, still functions. This demonstrates the ancient engineers' profound knowledge of hydraulic structures and agriculture. But despite these engineering achievements, the megalithic architecture raises the greatest questions. On the surface of some porphyry blocks, strange protrusions and indentations are visible, reminiscent of tool marks or technological devices. These protrusions are often called spikes, and there is still no single explanation for their origin. Some believe they were used to lift stones. Others believe they had ritual significance. Still others believe they are the remnants of a technological process lost to modern craftsmen. Of particular interest are the mysterious stacked stones found throughout the complex. They appear as if a soft stone was laid on top of another, allowing it to mold perfectly to the surface beneath. There is a theory that the ancient builders knew how to temporarily soften or structurally alter the rock, possibly using plant extracts. This theory remains controversial, but it attempts to explain the remarkable malleability of some blocks. Another mystery is the geometric orientation of Ollantaytambo. The complex was built taking into account the movements of the sun, stars, and the positions of mountain peaks, creating a complex system of astronomical markers. Some researchers believe that Ollantaytambo served as a kind of observatory, allowing for the determination of seasonal cycles important for agriculture. However, the scale and precision of the architecture suggest that the complex also had a deeper ritual significance. Perhaps its builders sought to reproduce on Earth the structure of celestial bodies or a symbolic model of the world. Inca legends say Ollantaytambo was a place of power, associated with great sages and gods. Some myths suggest that the complex's first builders were not the Incas, but pre-Inca people possessing extraordinary knowledge. Official archaeology contradicts this, but the structures themselves appear as if their architects were not limited to the typical technologies of the region. Another mystery is the stone channels and troughs that crisscross the complex. They form a complex network, seemingly designed to manage water flows, but their placement and shape raise questions. Some channels lead to areas that appear to have had no need for irrigation, suggesting that the water was used for ritual purposes or as part of some other device. There are theories that Ollantaytambo was a kind of engineering or energy complex, possibly related to the generation of vibrations or acoustic effects. Certain stone shapes create specific sound resonances that could have been used in rituals. Others believe the complex was part of a network of megalithic structures connected by energy lines known as ley lines. The underground sections of the complex are also intriguing: hidden corridors, closed entrances, and small chambers whose purpose remains unclear. They may have served as secret refuges or storage areas for ritual objects. The Incas often used underground spaces for sacred purposes, considering the earth a manifestation of the power of Pachamama. But at Ollantaytambo, the underground structures appear to be significantly older than the above-ground structures. Thus, Ollantaytambo is not just an archaeological site, but also a key to understanding Andean megalithic architecture. Its builders possessed knowledge that modern science is only beginning to comprehend. And while many of the complex's mysteries remain unsolved, its very existence demonstrates that ancient civilizations were capable of engineering and architectural achievements that surpass our understanding of the past. Rocky Valley Underground Network. The Rocky Valley Underground Network is one of the most poorly studied and mysterious structures in North America. Situated in remote, high-altitude areas, it was long known only to local residents and a few enthusiastic researchers. Official archaeology has paid little attention to it, as most of the passages are located outside major cultural centers, and their purpose remains unclear. But it is precisely this uncertainty and the strangeness of its architecture that makes Rocky Valley one of the continent's most intriguing underground complexes. The network structure is astonishing at first glance. Underground, there are corridors, chambers, vertical shafts, and ventilation systems, all emerging through narrow openings to the surface. Many of these openings are carved into solid rock with astonishing precision. The tunnel walls are often smooth, as if polished, and the passages have even angles. Yet there are no obvious traces of metal tools. Some surfaces resemble structures created by high temperatures or vibration processing. This raises many questions. Who would create such tunnels in these rocky mountains, and why? The first accounts of Rocky Valley's underground passages came from the 19th century explorers who heard legends from indigenous tribes about the passages of the ancestors, people who came before them and disappeared in time immemorial. Similar stories about beings living under the mountains and possessing extraordinary knowledge or skills are found in various cultures in the region. Some legends suggest that these subterranean inhabitants could travel between different parts of the mountains using a network of corridors built not by humans, but by ancestors who knew the breath of stone. Archaeological research conducted in the 20th and 21st centuries revealed that some of the tunnels are indeed artificial. Geologists have established that the cut lines and the nature of the walls do not correspond to natural cracks or karst voids. However, attempts to date the complex are difficult. Over millennia, the walls have become covered in sediment, and there is almost no organic material inside. Some experts believe that individual sections may be several thousand years old, casting doubt on the involvement of the known tribes of the region in their construction. One of the most intriguing features of Rocky Valley is its scale. Individual sections of the network are interconnected, forming several levels. The upper corridors are located relatively close to the surface, while the lower levels extend deep beneath the rock masses, where constant temperature and humidity conditions persist year-round. This could indicate a specific purpose for the complex. Perhaps it was used as a long-term shelter or storage facility, accessible only to a select few. Modern research has revealed a curious phenomenon. Some tunnels are completely echo-free. Sound is dampened by the walls, creating a feeling of complete isolation. In other places, on the contrary, a boost in low frequencies is observed, reminiscent of the acoustics of large megalithic chambers in Europe. This suggests that the builders may have understood the nature of sound and consciously used it in the construction of the complex. But what were their goals? Perhaps they were involved in ritual practices where sound played an important role. Perhaps it was a means of communication or voice recognition. But for now, these are just hypotheses. Some researchers have proposed that Rocky Valley was part of an ancient system of human migration between mountain regions, a route protected from the elements, predators, and enemies. If so, the network could have been used for covert migration or trade. However, the lack of evidence of sustained occupation, fires, food remains, or household items contradicts this. This suggests the tunnels were used sporadically, not for habitation. Another mystery is the presence of vertical shafts leading to the surface. Some are so narrow that they are barely passable. Their walls are smooth, with no signs of weathering. Perhaps the shafts served as ventilation ducts or had a ritual purpose, such as a connection with the sky. Indigenous North American cultures often feature the symbolism of a world above and a world below, connected by axial channels. If the Rocky Valley shafts truly had sacred significance, this suggests a highly religious organization in the society that created the complex. The most mysterious section of the network is considered to be the so-called Hall of Echolocation. This is a room in which the walls form a complex polygonal contour, and sound emitted in the center of the room is reflected in such a way as to create the effect of multiple voices. Researchers who have studied this effect suggest that the room may have been used for rituals involving communication with ancestors or spirits, or for shamanic training. However, the exact purpose of the room remains unknown. There's a theory that the Rocky Valley Underground Network may have been connected to astronomical observations. Some shafts are aligned with specific points on the horizon where bright stars rose in ancient times. If this isn't a coincidence, then the builders had knowledge of celestial cycles. Perhaps the complex was part of a calendar system used to determine the seasons or perform rituals on specific days. An even more controversial theory suggests that Rocky Valley was part of a mineral mining system. Some corridors do indeed lead to rock formations rich in rare minerals. However, the way the walls are treated is more reminiscent of religious or engineering architecture than mine workings. Furthermore, characteristic traces of mining, rock fragments, tools, or processing platforms are missing. There's a growing idea among modern researchers that the Rocky Valley Underground Network may be a relic of a lost North American culture, one that either disappeared long before the arrival of known tribes or was assimilated, leaving behind only architectural fragments. Such a complex and elaborate underground complex requires a high level of organization, engineering skill, and time. However, archaeological evidence for such a culture is still extremely limited. Rocky Valley remains a mystery. It combines elements of engineering, acoustics, ritual, and geometry. Perhaps its creators sought to construct a space that reflected their worldview, a kind of spiritual map or a place of connection with the other world. Or perhaps the complex served a strategic function, protecting the secret paths of mountain peoples. But until we can explore all the layers of the network, we can only speculate. One thing is clear: Rocky Valley cannot be considered in isolation from other mysterious underground structures around the world. It fits into a global phenomenon that suggests ancient cultures placed a special emphasis on subterranean space, perhaps considering it a place of power, knowledge, or protection. Karoo circles in Africa. The Karoo circles, located in South Africa, represent one of the continent's most poorly studied yet fascinating archaeological mysteries. These stone structures, scattered across vast plains, appear to be traces of an ancient engineering system, a multitude of circular and oval stone enclosures connected by a complex network of lines, passages, and ramparts. Their scale is so vast that many complexes are clearly visible only from above. The Karoo landscape is dotted with hundreds of these circles, yet their purpose and age remain the subject of fierce debate. The first explorers to encounter the Karoo circles assumed they were cattle enclosures, built relatively recently. But this explanation quickly fell into disuse. The circle's walls are too thin to protect animals, and many are located in areas where keeping large livestock was simply impossible. Furthermore, some circles vary in shape and construction. Some are constructed of small stones, others of large boulders. Some have perfectly even circles, while others form spiral structures resembling giant symbols. The age of the circles is one of the main mysteries. There are no written records in the region indicating who might have built such structures and when. Many of the structures appear ancient, as evidenced by the dense layer of soil encroaching on the stone walls and the erosion of the surface. Some researchers, relying on geological data, suggest that individual circles may be several thousand years old. Others believe they are younger, but still prehistoric. One of the most widely debated hypotheses is that the Karoo circles are the remains of an ancient agricultural or pastoral system. They may have been used to store grain or were part of a complex irrigation system. However, landscape analysis shows that most circles are located on elevated areas where water collection is poor. No traces of canals, reservoirs, or other irrigation systems have been found. This forces researchers to seek other explanations. The question of the builder's social structure also arises. Creating such a large-scale network of stone structures requires significant labor resources, as well as knowledge of geometry and planning. However, the known archaeological record of South Africa contains no mention of cultures capable of such structural projects. Perhaps we are dealing with the remains of tribes that left no written language and disappeared long before the emergence of the known civilizations of the region. Some researchers suggest that the Karoo circles were part of a sacred landscape, a kind of map created by ancient people for ritual or astronomical purposes. Some circles are arranged in such a way that they form geometric patterns that can only be observed from a great height. This suggests that the structures may have been oriented towards specific celestial bodies or events. The astronomical theory is supported by the astonishing precision of some of the circles. They are so perfect that it seems as if the builders possessed instruments for measuring angles and distances. However, no archaeological traces of such instruments have been found. This gives rise to theories that the Karoo circles may have been part of an ancient system of celestial observations, possibly in the context of calendar cycles. Other researchers believe the circles may have been resonant structures. Some stone formations in the region have the ability to amplify or modify sound waves. Assuming the builders were aware of these properties, they may have used the circles for ritual chants, transmitting vibrations over long distances. This also explains the variety of shapes. Each structure may have had a unique frequency and purpose. But one of the most controversial hypotheses remains the ancient settlement network theory. According to it, the Karoo circles are the remains of small, rounded dwelling structures, where the walls served as frames for dwellings made of organic materials. This theory seems reasonable, but it faces difficulties. There are too many circles, and many of them are located on slopes unsuitable for settlements. Furthermore, the structure of some circles contains elements that are difficult to explain as a domestic purpose. For example, square sections within circular walls or spiral corridors. Of particular interest is the presence of long connecting lines between the circles. They appear like low walls or paths, forming a complex network reminiscent of a strange stone map. These lines may have served as roads or boundaries, but their number and length suggest a more symbolic purpose. Some believe the lines were part of a communication system, perhaps used to transmit sound, vibrations, or signals between distant circles. It's also worth noting that the Karoo circles are located in mineral-rich areas. Some researchers suggest that these structures may have been used for resource extraction or processing. However, the lack of tools or evidence of systematic mining casts doubt on this hypothesis. Finally, there's a theory that the Karoo circles are part of an ancient energy network designed to interact with the Earth's natural fields. This theory is similar to the idea of ley lines, energy pathways connecting sacred sites around the world. Although there is no scientific evidence to support this concept, it explains many strange coincidences. The location of the circles, their connection to topography, and their alignment with celestial bodies. In any case, the Karoo circles remain one of the most enigmatic structures in South Africa. Their diversity, scale, and unclear purpose evoke awe and wonder. Perhaps they were sacred sites used for rituals or celestial observations. Perhaps they were settlements of forgotten peoples. Or perhaps we are witnessing part of a system whose function and meaning we cannot yet understand. One thing is clear: the Karoo circles are traces of the past that require in-depth research. They can reveal much about the ancient cultures of South Africa, cultures that left behind not words, but stones, and these stones continue to pose questions whose answers remain to be found. Stone pillars of Göbekli Tepe. Göbekli Tepe is one of the most enigmatic and fundamentally important archaeological discoveries of recent decades. Situated in the hills of Anatolia, this complex has revolutionized scientists' understanding of the origins of human civilization. It dates back to approximately the 10th millennium BC, a time when, according to the traditional scientific model, people lived in small hunter-gatherer groups, lacking permanent settlements and certainly monumental architecture. But Göbekli Tepe demonstrates the opposite: colossal stone structures constructed with a high degree of engineering precision, requiring collective organization, architectural knowledge, and technological preparation, which in no way fit into the picture of a primitive Neolithic. The most impressive part of the complex are the enormous T-shaped limestone pillars, up to 6 meters high and weighing up to 15 tons. They are set within round or oval enclosures reminiscent of ritual complexes. Some pillars are carved with complex animal reliefs: lions, snakes, foxes, boars, cranes, and scorpions. The images are executed with astonishing detail, demonstrating a high level of artistic and technical skill. Even more astonishing, however, is the meticulous craftsmanship of the pillars, which required considerable effort and coordination. One of the main mysteries of Göbekli Tepe is how the builders moved the large stone blocks. In an era when there were no wheeled transport, no domesticated draft animals, and no metal tools, the creation of such megaliths seems incredible. Scientists speculate that the builders used simple levers, wooden skids, and teamwork. But even with such methods, transporting multi-ton stones remains a formidable task. Some researchers suggest that innovative methods of gently breaking the stone or using fire and water may have been used at that time. However, evidence for these technologies is still limited. The Göbekli Tepe reliefs are a mystery unto themselves. Many of the images are symbolic: repeated animal motifs, geometric signs, and abstract compositions. Some researchers believe the images reflect the cosmogonic and mythological beliefs of ancient people. Perhaps this is an early form of sacred writing, with each animal symbolizing a specific force or aspect of the universe. The circle and creatures within a circle motif is particularly intriguing. It is repeated in several places and may allude to cycles of time or rituals of renewal. A key element of the mystery is the lack of evidence of a permanent settlement near the complex. Excavations have revealed no houses, storerooms, or production areas typical of ancient settlements. This suggests that people came to Göbekli Tepe specifically for rituals. The complex served as a sacred center, attracting groups from considerable distances. This fact radically changes our understanding of the formation of civilization. Perhaps it was religious and ritual centers that became the first cities, around which permanent settlements later arose. The construction of the complex required significant social organization. To build and maintain such structures, a group of people must have possessed skills in coordination, resource management, and labor distribution. This requires the presence of leaders, specialists, and craftsmen. Göbekli Tepe thus challenges the idea that social structure emerged only after the transition to agriculture. Perhaps the opposite was true. Complex ritual centers emerged first, and then agriculture and sedentary life developed to support them. Another mystery is the deliberate burying of the complex. When one circular structure ceased to be used, it was covered with earth and construction debris, and then a new one was built. This suggests a ritual cycle of renewal or generational change. But why did the ancient builders bury such meticulously crafted structures? Perhaps to preserve them for future generations or to complete a ritual cycle. Some researchers link this process to climate change or external threats. Geological studies indicate that Göbekli Tepe was located in a region experiencing significant climate change. The transition from an ice age to a warmer climate may have brought new living conditions, forcing people to seek ways to adapt. Therefore, the complex may have been part of an attempt to establish a connection with higher powers or to bring order to the surrounding world through rituals. Astronomical theories also offer new insights into Göbekli Tepe. Some researchers believe that the arrangement of the pillars and reliefs reflect the positions of stars or important astronomical events. For example, it is hypothesized that the complex could have been aligned with the constellation Cygnus or the movement of Sirius. This is supported by the recurring animal motif, sometimes interpreted as zodiacal symbols. If this theory is correct, Göbekli Tepe was an ancient observatory built to observe the sky and predict natural cycles. Some researchers have advanced the bold hypothesis that the complex was part of a global megalithic culture that existed before recorded history. Megalithic structures built long before classical civilizations have been discovered in various parts of the world, from Peru to Malta. They share common features: large stone slabs, a round or oval shape, and an orientation toward the stars. This may indicate the presence of an ancient cultural heritage that spread across the globe in prehistoric times. But no less important are the minor mysteries of Göbekli Tepe: depressions in the stones, strange protrusions, and functional elements resembling fastenings or anchor points. These may indicate the use of pillars as supports for roofs or wooden structures. However, no direct traces of such roofs have been found. This raises the question: were these circles completely open ritual spaces, or did they have a complex superstructure that has not survived? Overall, Göbekli Tepe demonstrates a remarkable combination of engineering mastery, symbolic thought, and spiritual organization. It demonstrates that human culture began to develop much earlier and in a far more complex manner than is commonly believed. Göbekli Tepe became a bridge between the world of hunter-gatherers and emerging civilizations. Its mysteries continue to inspire researchers, and the answers to many questions remain hidden in the earth. Stone Valleys of Tassili. The stone valleys of Tassili Najar, located deep in the Sahara Desert in southeastern Algeria, represent one of the most astonishing and enigmatic regions of ancient history. This place has been called a stone museum, a dead ocean, and even a gallery of the gods, due to the thousands of preserved rock paintings and megalithic structures, some over 10,000 years old. The Tassili Massif is more than just a desolate mountain region. It is a territory where geology, art, mythology, and traces of vanished cultures merge into a single fabric, raising questions about ancient civilizations whose traces have been almost completely lost to time. The first thing that strikes one is the incredible concentration of rock art. The drawings depict scenes of hunting, everyday life, dancing, and herding, as well as strange figures resembling creatures wearing masks or tall helmets. Some images are so unusual that they have been dubbed floating, as the figures appear to hover above the ground. Scholars interpret these drawings as a reflection of shamanic practices. The people depicted in a trance-like state appear to be exiting their bodies. However, an alternative viewpoint holds that these figures symbolize contacts with beings of a different origin, echoed in the myths of local peoples. The megalithic structures of Tassili are no less enigmatic. Among the stone valleys, there are circles of large slabs, tall vertical monoliths, and stone gates oriented toward the cardinal points. Some complexes resemble ancient observatories. Their open sections are oriented toward the horizon, where key stars appear at certain times of the year. This suggests that the ancient inhabitants of the region possessed astronomical knowledge that was lost in later eras. Another mystery concerns the climate. Today, Tassili is a desert, but at the time the rock art was created, the region was green and rich in water resources. The images depict giraffes, hippopotamuses, and elephants, animals that would never have survived in the modern Sahara. This suggests that the Tassili artists lived in a significantly wetter era. But how did they survive the subsequent desertification? Did they disappear, migrate, or transform their practices? There is no answer. It is theorized that Tassili was the center of an ancient cult tradition associated with the transition from hunting to herding and early agriculture. Some images depict people milking animals, as well as scenes resembling ritual ceremonies. Perhaps Tassili was a unique transitional space where new forms of economy and social organization emerged. However, the images are too diverse to be clearly attributed to a single cultural process. Each era seems to have imprinted its own symbols on these stones, creating a unique, multi-layered archive. Of particular note are the giant hippos and masked creatures, figures up to 3 meters tall, executed in a distinctive style. They resemble neither animals nor humans, but rather supernatural or ritual images. Some researchers believe they depict deities with whom shamans communicated. Others interpret them as symbols of cosmic forces. These images are so enigmatic that even within modern archaeology, they remain a subject of debate. The technique used to create the drawings is also intriguing. Many images were created using complex dyes, including mineral pigments and organic components, which allowed the paint to retain its vibrancy for thousands of years. This demonstrates a knowledge of chemical processes. Furthermore, some drawings were executed using engraving, where the deep lines allow the image to withstand erosion. This combination of techniques speaks to a high artistic culture and technological ingenuity. However, in addition to rock art, Tassili also contains an equally enigmatic architectural layer. In some valleys, stone platforms, walls, and building foundations created without mortar are found. Their shape is unusual. Straight lines are rare, and rounded contours are more common, reminiscent of naturalistic architecture integrated into the natural landscape. These structures may have been used as shelters or campsites, but some researchers believe they may have had a ritual purpose. A major mystery is the distribution of the drawings. They are often located in difficult-to-reach areas, high cliffs, narrow passages, and hidden niches. This suggests that access to these images was limited. They may have served as initiation sites, where priests or shamans imparted knowledge to a select few. Some drawings, especially in deep caves, were made in areas with almost no light. This suggests the use of torches or other light sources. However, even with such illumination, the detail of the images is striking. The stone valleys of Tassili also possess acoustic properties. In some places, sounds reflect in unusual ways, creating a polyphonic effect. In ancient times, such areas could have been used for rituals. The sound of drums or chants, amplified many times over, would have created a mystical atmosphere, enhancing the impact of the ritual. Interestingly, Tassili remained hidden from archaeologists for a long time. Only in the mid-20th century was it explored by French expeditions, who took thousands of photographs of the rock art. Many of the images were initially considered fakes, so unusual and modern did they appear. However, analysis revealed their authenticity and antiquity. Since then, Tassili has become one of the key sites of prehistoric art. However, the region still holds many mysteries. Many valleys are difficult to access, some areas have been destroyed by erosion, and some of the paintings remain unexplored. Furthermore, the question of the cultural affiliation of the Tassili artists remains open. They could have been the ancestors of the modern Tuareg people or representatives of vanished tribes who lived during the era when the Sahara was a green savanna landscape. Some researchers have suggested that Tassili may have been the center of an ancient civilization that disappeared due to climate change. Perhaps the art, techniques, and rituals of this site reflect a culture that influenced subsequent civilizations in North Africa and the Middle East. However, there is no direct evidence for this. Nevertheless, Tassili remains a unique place on Earth where stone, time, and art merge into a single space. Its valleys are windows into a past no less complex and mysterious than subsequent eras. And perhaps Tassili will yet reveal to the world the secrets of ancient people whose hands left evidence in stone of a culture that existed long before the first cities. Yonaguni Dungeons. The underwater structures off the coast of Yonaguni Island, located in southwestern Japan, have become one of the most discussed archaeological mysteries of the late 20th and early 21st centuries. These gigantic stone platforms, steps, terraces, and vertical walls lie at depths of 5 to 25 meters and appear so geometrically perfect that they have sparked debate for decades. Are these natural formations or traces of a vanished civilization? The Yonaguni complex is simultaneously similar and unlike known megalithic structures around the world, making it particularly intriguing. The official position of some geologists is that Yonaguni structures are the result of natural erosion. The region's volcanic rocks exhibit natural layering and fractures, which under the influence of time and ocean currents could have formed steps, flat surfaces, and right angles. However, this explanation is contested by researchers who point to the excessively high degree of symmetry and geometric precision of many of the features. One of the key mysteries is the so-called main platform, a massive structure resembling a giant terraced pyramid. Its steps have distinct edges, smooth surfaces, and uniform heights, suggesting deliberate engineering. The steps lead upward to a square platform, which some researchers believe was a ritual space. Geologists acknowledge that natural erosion can form steps, but not with such symmetry and regularity. Another part of the complex features vertical walls up to 5 meters high, forming corridors. They are so straight as if they were cut with a tool. Some of these walls form angles close to 90 degrees. Such perfect right angles are extremely rare in nature. This suggests that the complex may have been part of a megalithic structure, once built on dry land and then submerged. It is hypothesized that Yonaguni was a cult or ritual center of an ancient culture that existed at the end of the last ice age. If sea levels were lower, the complex would have been located on dry land, and its geometric structures could have been used for astronomical observations or ritual ceremonies. Some researchers point out that the arrangement of some elements of the complex corresponds to the orientation of the solstices. However, this theory remains controversial, as precise data on the position of the horizon at that time is lacking. Of particular interest is the turtle head, a rock outcrop that resembles an animal sculpture. Some see it as a stylized image of a turtle, others a sea monster or a patron spirit. However, most geologists believe this is a coincidence. Nevertheless, the very idea of a natural object serving as the basis for a ritual structure seems entirely possible within the context of ancient cults. Underwater exploration revealed another astonishing feature: a long, straight channel, approximately 2 meters wide, resembling a corridor or passage. Its shape is so regular that it's difficult to attribute its origins solely to natural erosion. Horizontal lines are visible on its walls, which could be tool marks or the result of structural features of the rock. Some believe this corridor may have served as a water channel or a passage between sectors of the complex. Another mystery is the large stone slabs found near the structures. They are of uniform thickness and have smooth edges, as if they were separated from the main rock. They may have been part of a building material that was never used. However, it is difficult to explain how ancient people could have worked such massive blocks without metal tools. Some researchers suggest that the Yonaguni complex was part of a larger cultural system encompassing Japan, Taiwan, China, and regions of Southeast Asia. This hypothesis is based on the similarity of certain symbolic images and architectural forms. If so, Yonaguni could have been one of the most ancient centers of early cultures in the Pacific region. But there's another more radical theory. Yonaguni could have been part of a lost civilization that existed before the known cultures of East Asia. This civilization could have been destroyed by catastrophic changes in sea levels approximately 10,000 years ago. This theory is supported by data on global sea level rise, which could have led to the inundation of coastal settlements around the world. Similar megalithic structures have been found off the coasts of India, Cuba, and the Bahamas. Yonaguni may be one fragment of this lost network of ancient settlements. Supporters of the archaeological theory also point to strange platforms and stands that resemble artificial theaters or meeting places. Their steps are uniform, and the angle of inclination is the same in different parts of the complex. Some even believe that ritual dances or ceremonies associated with the cult of the sea, ancestors, or cosmic forces may have been held at Yonaguni. However, skeptics rightly point out that the lack of artifacts, pottery, tools, bones, significantly complicates archaeological interpretation. Submerged objects typically retain traces of human activity, but very little evidence of human habitation has been found at Yonaguni. Nevertheless, the lack of artifacts can be explained by strong currents and erosion, which could have washed away small objects. Geological studies have also revealed that some surfaces of the complex bear traces of processing, reminiscent of grinding or smoothing. These traces are located at altitudes inconvenient for natural erosion, raising doubts about the structure's entirely natural origin. However, there is still insufficient evidence to definitively confirm the complex's artificial origin. Controversy over Yonaguni continues because the complex has a dual nature. It appears simultaneously natural and artificial. Perhaps ancient people utilized natural geometric forms, enhancing them or adapting them for ritual purposes. In that case, Yonaguni would be analogous to megalithic sanctuaries built on natural hills or rock formations. In any case, the complex is a unique phenomenon, a gigantic structure preserving clean lines, sharp angles, and terraces that defy both geology and archaeology. Yonaguni remains one of the most important sites for underwater research, and its mysteries stimulate the search for new methods capable of combining geological, archaeological, and oceanographic data. Baalbek Massifs. Baalbek, located in modern-day Lebanon, is considered one of the most astonishing megalithic complexes in the world. Its gigantic stone blocks, majestic platforms, and enigmatic structures amaze even seasoned archaeologists. Particularly striking are the masses of the so-called Trilithon platform, 3 monolithic blocks, each weighing approximately 800 to 1,000 tons. Nearby lies an even larger stone, the famous Stone of the Pregnant Woman, estimated to weigh up to 1,200 tons, as well as even larger blocks in neighboring quarries, each weighing over 1,600 tons. These masses make Baalbek unique, as nowhere else in the ancient world are such large stone structures lifted and placed with such precision. One of the main questions about Baalbek remains the purpose and origin of the megalithic platform. Conventional archaeology attributes the construction of the upper levels of the complex to the Romans, who erected a grand temple to Jupiter on this site. However, the lower megalithic platforms, especially the Trilithon, in many ways defy Roman construction techniques. While the Romans were skilled in working with large stones, the size of the Baalbek blocks far exceeds their usual capabilities. The heaviest stone used by the Romans elsewhere weighed approximately 400 tons, while structures 2 to 3 times larger have been found in Baalbek. The question arises, who and how could move stones weighing over 1,000 tons? Even modern cranes struggle to cope with such tasks. Researchers suggest that ancient builders used a combination of levers, rollers, ropes, and the strength of hundreds of workers. But such methods can hardly explain the movement of multi-ton blocks over long distances, especially considering that the quarry was not directly adjacent, but sometimes several hundred meters from the construction platforms. The logistics of such an operation seem improbable given ancient technology. Some researchers suggest that Baalbek was built in several stages, with the oldest level of megaliths belonging to a vanished civilization that existed long before the Romans and even the Canaanites. This is highly controversial, but the fact remains. The lower blocks are so massive and so precisely fitted together that it's difficult to imagine how they could have been erected using Bronze Age or even Iron Age technology. The Baalbek megaliths are remarkable not only for their mass, but also for the quality of their workmanship. Their surfaces are remarkably smooth, and their angles retain their precision despite millennia of erosion. Some blocks have small protrusions, which may have been part of the lifting or fixing process. These protrusions are found in megaliths from various cultures, suggesting the existence of universal engineering principles used by ancient craftsmen around the world. The orientation of Baalbek presents a particular mystery. The platforms and temple complexes are aligned with astronomical directions, suggesting that their builders had knowledge of the movements of the sun, moon, and stars. Some researchers believe that Baalbek was not only a temple, but also an observatory where celestial cycles were observed. This explains why later cultures, the Canaanites, Phoenicians, and Romans, continued to use this site as a sacred center. There's also a legend that Baalbek was built by giants. This version is reflected in ancient Near Eastern manuscripts, which speak of the city of Baalat, erected by beings of enormous stature. While the legend is symbolic, it reflects a real impression. The blocks are so enormous that an ordinary person appears tiny in comparison. Perhaps the legends arose as an attempt to explain what the human mind could not comprehend. The methods of transporting the megaliths are also of interest. Some geologists claim that the blocks were moved on damp soil cushions or along wooden paths, lubricated with oils or animal fats. While such methods might have worked for stones weighing several hundred tons, they seem highly unlikely for giants weighing 1,000 tons or more. Other researchers suggest the use of stone rollers or even primitive sleds, but this too is questionable due to the enormous friction and weight of the structures. Some theories go beyond traditional archaeology, suggesting lost technologies based on vibration or acoustics. This hypothesis is based on the idea that some ancient cultures used sound for ritual and construction purposes. If the ancient builders of Baalbek knew about the properties of vibration, they could have used it to lift stones more easily or reduce weight. However, evidence for this is still insufficient. As for the complex's purpose, there are also various hypotheses. Baalbek could have been a temple center, a ritual complex, a place of worship, or even a site for political meetings. However, some researchers believe the megalithic platform served as the foundation for an unknown structure that was destroyed before Roman construction. It may have been an ancient ziggurat or a cult tower similar to those found in Mesopotamia. However, there is no direct evidence for this. Another mystery is the evidence of possible seismic activity. Baalbek is located in a region prone to earthquakes, yet the megalithic blocks have retained their stability better than later structures. This suggests that the ancient builders took natural conditions into account and created a platform resistant to tremors. This engineering expertise is impressive and suggests they had a working knowledge of soil and rock mechanics. Equally intriguing is the fact that Baalbek remained a sacred site for centuries. Each new culture that arrived in the area utilized the existing structures without completely destroying them. This speaks to the continuity of the sacred tradition and the ancients' view of Baalbek as a special place of power. Perhaps its location coincides with geological or electromagnetic anomalies, which would have reinforced the impression of sacredness. Modern research continues to uncover new facts about Baalbek. Ground-penetrating radar has revealed hidden levels beneath the megalithic platform, but their purpose is still unknown. Additional chambers or passages may be located there. Excavations in quarry areas reveal that some giant blocks were left unfinished or unused, which may indicate a sudden halt to construction, perhaps due to a catastrophe. Thus, Baalbek remains a mystery, evoking both admiration and bewilderment. Its megaliths continue to stand despite time and natural disasters, like a monument to a vanished engineering tradition. Perhaps the answer to the origin of Baalbek's massifs lies ahead, and when it is discovered, it could change our understanding of the ancient world just as much as Göbekli Tepe or Stonehenge. Monte Alban Passages. Monte Alban, located atop a mountain plateau in the state of Oaxaca, Mexico, is one of the oldest and most significant archaeological complexes in Mesoamerica. Its terraces, pyramids, observatories, and palaces are astonishing in their scale. But even more astonishing are the hidden underground structures, mysterious passages, tunnels, and chambers that extend beneath the city's foundations. Much of Monte Alban points to a high level of engineering, but the underground structures pose questions that remain unanswered. The first mention of Monte Alban's underground passages dates back to the 19th century, when explorers noticed strange holes and shafts at the base of some platforms. Over time, it was discovered that these openings led to a complex network of tunnels, some of which stretch for hundreds of meters. The passages cross various sections of the city, connecting plazas, temples, and several observatories. But the purpose of these tunnels remains a mystery. They are too narrow and low for large-scale human movement, but they are sufficiently smooth and carefully carved to rule out accidental natural origins. Many tunnels have ventilation openings to the surface, indicating that they were intended for long-term use. In some places, small chambers were discovered that could have served as either shrines or storage areas. However, there are no obvious traces of fires, household items, or organic remains, suggesting that the underground spaces were not used for habitation or routine work. One of the most intriguing parts of the underground system is a tunnel leading from the main plaza to a structure known as Building J, the enigmatic Monte Alban Observatory. This building is distinctive from the others due to its shape. It is tilted, and its orientation is not aligned with the city's main axis. Researchers believe Building J was used to observe the stars and planetary movements. The tunnel leading to it may have served as part of a ritual path or a hidden route for priests who used the observatory at certain times of the year. It is believed that the Monte Alban tunnels were used for astronomical observations. Some corridors are oriented toward points on the horizon, corresponding to sunrise on the solstices. Rituals or observations requiring light control could have been performed in such places. Narrow vertical shafts could have served as light channels, allowing the determination of the moment of the annual cycle by the penetration of sunlight into the underground chamber. If this hypothesis is correct, the underground network was part of a complex astronomical instrument. However, not all tunnels can be explained by astronomy. Some lead to artificial water reservoirs or to sites where traces of mineral processing have been discovered. This suggests that Monte Alban had a complex water supply system, possibly involving underground channels. But unlike the known sewer or irrigation systems of other cultures, the Monte Alban tunnels have an unusual formation, intertwining functional and ritual elements. Monte Alban's underground network may also have served a strategic function. Some researchers believe the tunnels were used as secret routes, allowing priests, warriors, or rulers to move undetected. This explains the narrowness of some passages and the presence of hidden entrances in the temple walls. However, the tunnel's dimensions still exceed those typically associated with purely military or secret passages. There are even more daring theories. Some researchers suggest that Monte Alban's underground network may have been connected to cults of death and the underworld. In Mesoamerican mythology, the underworld, Mictlan, held a significant place, and the passages between worlds were considered sacred paths. Perhaps the Monte Alban tunnels symbolize this path and were used by priests for ritual passages. Several chambers are circular in shape and have acoustics reminiscent of ritual chambers in other cultures. Sounds in these chambers resonate, creating the effect of multiple voices, perfect for religious ceremonies. Monte Alban is also known for its stelae and glyphs. Some images found near the entrances to the dungeons depict symbols related to war, the capture of prisoners, and interactions with the gods. Perhaps the entrance to the underground tunnels was considered a sacred or dangerous place, accessible only to initiates. This explains the lack of traces of everyday life and the carefully concealed entrances. Geophysical surveys in recent years have revealed the presence of additional voids beneath the city that have not yet been excavated. Some are located at such a depth that access to them is complicated by natural strata or collapses. This suggests that the underground network is significantly larger than we currently know. Monte Alban may have a multi-level structure, analogous to the ancient underground cities of Cappadocia, but in a different cultural form. Another hypothesis concerns the acoustic properties of some tunnels. Researchers have discovered that in certain areas, sound propagates in a specific way. Low frequencies are amplified, while high frequencies are attenuated. This could have been used for rituals, where the priest's voice needed to sound particularly powerful. Similar acoustics are found in the Maltese hypogeums and some megalithic tombs in Europe. Of interest is the fact that the Monte Alban dungeons include areas where the walls bear polished or processed marks reminiscent of tool marks. However, tools capable of creating such smooth surfaces have not been found. This suggests either advanced stoneworking techniques or the existence of specialized workshops, traces of which have not survived. It's also worth noting that the city's architecture has a complex geometric system. Its layout takes into account the horizon, the position of nearby mountain peaks, and the direction of sunrise. Perhaps the underground network was part of the city's overall symbolic structure, connecting the earthly, celestial, and subterranean worlds. Some researchers suggest that Monte Alban may have served as a training center for priests or knowledge keepers. The underground chambers may have been used to store sacred texts or ritual objects. However, due to the lack of writing in most Mesoamerican cultures, it is difficult to understand what knowledge might have been transmitted. Regardless, the passages of Monte Alban remain one of the most enigmatic parts of the ancient city. They demonstrate a high level of engineering and the complexity of the spiritual lives of its inhabitants. Perhaps future research will reveal the true purpose of these underground passages. But for now, Monte Alban remains a place where the past is hidden, not only in the ruins above ground, but also in the depths of the earth, where every corridor preserves traces of long-lost knowledge. Stone platforms, underground passages, gigantic monoliths, and vanished sanctuaries scattered across the world form a chain of hints at the existence of ancient traditions whose knowledge is almost lost. Each structure, from Baalbek to Monte Alban, reveals only a fragment of the past, hinting at civilizations whose capabilities exceeded the expectations of their time. Their secrets live on, inspiring new research and reminding us that Earth's history is far deeper than we imagine.